Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome to Best Ball Live, presented by 4for4.com. I'm your host, Greg Smith, and this week on the show, John Paulsen from 4for4 is joining me to draft a Superflex Best Ball Slim at the FFPC. John, welcome to the show. How you doing, bud?
Howdy. How's it going? This is going to be fun. Superflex is always an interesting format to do. My bread and butter is one quarterback, but it's always fun to try to strategize the two quarterback league because it changes strategy so much.
Yep, and we drew the 11th pick in this particular best ball draft. Where does your mind first go? I don't want you to give up too much information here because it's possible some of our competitors are viewing us on the screen, but what's your lean for the early picks in this format based on your experience with it so far?
Well, in any sort of strange format, this would probably apply to Scott Fishbowl as well, and other leagues that I draft in. Anytime it's a little bit odd, I will try to find some ADP and see, especially for something like two quarterback. I want to see where the last quarterbacks that I would feel comfortable having, where are they going, and how can I compile a group of two or three that I'm happy with. And so I think for this situation, the 11 pick is, I don't think there's really a bad pick in Superflex. I think you can pretty much, you can make, and I think it's probably true this year for regular redraft too. There aren't terrible picks because there's quite a bit of depth, I think, in that second round. I think here, I probably would like to get one of those elite quarterbacks if they're on the board. They may go fired off the board one after another, and maybe we're left with looking at somebody in the 8 to 10 range there at 11. But I hope that's not the case. I might go another direction in that situation. Probably maybe one quarterback and maybe another position, whether it's tight end or running back or even wide receiver, depending on what the value holds there with that pick.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I agree with you that there isn't necessarily a bad pick in Superflex. A lot of people in a one quarterback league will prefer to have an earlier pick so they can get one of those kind of locked in bell cow running backs. Mm-hmm. But the nice thing about a two quarterback format is that if you miss out on those players, then you can go get one of the elite QBs and you still have access to the elite wide receivers. And because we're drafting here on the FFPC, which is tight end premium, tight ends score more than they normally would. It's 1.5 points per reception for the tight ends, which is more than every other position. So Travis Kelce goes way up the board. Darren Waller, George Kittle go way up the board. So you really have a lot of options throughout those first two rounds to put together a nice start. The question you have to ask yourself is, where do you think you're going to find depth later in the draft, right? And how are you going to use that to your advantage when you make those early picks?
And I see that the ADP that they have up in the draft room looks like it's Superflex. They got Justin Herbert at 13, Kyler Murray at 7. So
that was not the case last week when we drafted, if I'm not mistaken.
So they must have updated that.
That's nice. So McCaffrey goes 101. Because you prefer to get one of those elite quarterbacks, is that the pick you would make at 101? Would you take CMC or would you go with Mahomes or a QB up there?
Well, I would look at ADP and see who are the quarterbacks available at 2-3. And if maybe you take two there at that turn, and it depends on who you're comfortable with. Looking at the ADP that I pulled up, let's say I'm sitting at 212. Looks like Joe Burrow's going 211, Aaron Rodgers going 3-1. So you could go McCaffrey and then Burrow Rodgers or Burrow Brady or something like that. I wouldn't have a problem with that because you're also locking in the number one quarterback as well. So so far we have 3 non-quarterbacks. It's interesting.
Yeah, Kelce third overall. Not what I would have expected here. We took him second overall last week, kind of on a whim to see how the draft would play out. Maybe that's what this drafter is doing. But I think there is an argument to be made for Kelce as high as 101 in this format. What do you think about that?
I think the ADP that I saw the last 30 days was 7 for him. I think he's terrific. I think in any sort of tight end premium league. I mean, I've been drafting Kelsey for years now, usually in the second or third round, and now his cost has gone up. In our main event league last year, we drafted Kelsey like 5 or 6 overall, and it ended up being the right pick because we avoided a lot of those running backs that got hurt last year. So it paid off when we finished first. So there goes Mahomes, first quarterback off the board at 5.
Yeah, it seems like we might have a shot here at one of those elite guys at number 11.
Two off the board in a row. Interested to see what happens here, 7 through 10.
That is the highest I've seen George Kittle go in one of these drafts. Again,
yeah, that's aggressive. Maybe
not unreasonable based upon a projection you might have for George Kittle, but based upon ADP, I don't really like it because he might be there for that 4th pick drafter in the 2nd round based upon the average outcome of these drafts.
Yeah, his ADP is 2.9, so he might have been there for him. He would have maybe a 50% chance of getting him at whatever is that, two, that's 2.9, right? 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, that's exactly 2.9. So he could have maybe had him in the 2nd round. All right, Waller went off the board. We had talked about maybe Waller here at the turn, offline.
How big of a drop-off do you think it is from those top 3 tight ends to the next tier?
Fairly significant. I wouldn't be thinking tight end in the 2nd round here with those 3 guys off the board.
So here's who we're looking at the top of the board on FFPC. Lamar Jackson, the top-ranked quarterback. Justin Herbert behind him, and Russell Wilson behind Herbert at the position. Then it's running backs. Barkley, Kamara, Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry. Do you have a strong lean in one direction or the other?
Let's see who went here. All right, Jackson went. So I guess maybe what are the chances that this guy at the 12 spot takes both Herbert and Wilson? If one of those guys is available, we could go best available running back here, which I think for me would be Henry, and then pick off Herbert or Wilson in the 2nd round. Mm-hmm. But I think either way, there's a good going to be a good running back there in the 2nd round for us.
So if that's the case, would you prefer to start with the quarterback position here in the 1st round?
Yeah, let's go Herbert.
Okay, Herbert, welcome to the squad, bud. And now we're looking probably running back with this next pick. I mean, would you give any consideration if this drafter at the turn doesn't take a QB, just to double tap and take Wilson?
We're looking PPR. He just took Wilson. Okay. I wouldn't. I might have gone Wilson there, but we won't be faced with that decision. I would love to get. I mean, there's a number of backs here that are good.
Right.
Henry, Elliott, Kamara, right, are all still on the board.
Yep. And I think you mentioned that Henry was your preference of this group. Do you want to just smash the button on him here?
Yeah, Henry here. Yep.
Okay, that was an easy pick to make. What makes Henry stand out to you so much more than Kamara and Taylor, Zeke Elliott, and the other running backs available in this range?
I think it's guaranteed workload. He's been just a high volume guy. I've seen people like talking about his. This is the year that he's going to break down because he had a couple of high touch years, but I think he's an outlier when it comes to that. We'll see. I mean, we'll see. He's been very fortunate not to have any injuries really. But you look at, I think Zeke's pretty safe as well. But like a Kamara, I'm a little bit worried about his workload with Latavius Murray there and what's going on at the quarterback position. I like him, but I like Henry more. And I think the same goes for Taylor. I've got Taylor at 9 in PPR. But, Nyheim Hines is there. They re-signed Marlon Mack. I think he's a safe pick. I think he's probably going to see the lion's share of those touches. But we saw that, at times they limited his workload that last season. It wasn't until the end of the year that he really took off, and that was with Mack injured. And it was, and Hines was still playing quite a few snaps.
Yeah, for me, I don't think you can make an argument about too many touches for Henry if you're going to just turn around and draft one of these other high-touch running backs, right? I mean, anyone's injury-prone until they're not. And I mean, he if anything, like, yeah, I look at the track record of him staying healthy, and that gives me maybe not extra confidence, but it makes me think he has just as good of a shot as any of these other guys. I mean, it's a tough position to play when you're handling the ball that many times. But yeah, I agree with you. I mean, the track record is really tough to pass up. And go ahead.
I was just going to say, look at all those quarterbacks went after kind of a slow start with quarterbacks. The next 7 guys, kind of the top 7 that we've been talking about, all the way through Wilson, they went all from pick 5 to pick 12. So they just went off the board quickly.
This has been a very run-centric opening here with all the tight ends going within the top 7 rounds. We got a big QB run followed by a big running back run. And I can't really quibble with the order of any of them. I think I would have Derrick Henry over Saquon Barkley. But otherwise, Taylor, Kamara, Zeke, following those guys makes some sense. We'll see which running backs make it back to us in the next round. I don't want to talk about anybody who you might be targeting here, John. But
the nice thing is going quarterback, running back, we have options at the next turn. We had talked about potentially taking Waller early in the second or late first, and that would have kind of paid us, if we went quarterback Waller, that would have painted us in the corner a little bit at the running back position. But now that we have Henry there, we can go a number of different directions with this 3-4 turn.
Right. And just to talk a little bit about the settings of these leagues for any viewers who might not be familiar, the starting lineups each week are a quarterback position, a super flex position, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, and a standard flex. So you only absolutely need to start 2 wide receivers in any given week. Your other flex spots can all be occupied by other positions. I think that does push down the value of wide receivers, and you're seeing it play out here on the draft board. The wide receiver position is just not as high of a priority in this format because tight ends have the premium PPR scoring. Quarterbacks, you have to start twice as many as you would than in a normal best ball. And so I think we're going to be able to wait on wide receiver a little bit if we want. Obviously, if a player we like is available at one of our picks, we can do that. I do like trying to get one quote unquote stud wideout if possible, but I feel like that tier or that group of potential wide receiver studs is bigger than ever.
Yeah, and I just noticed that my primary target at 311, which was Ryan Tannehill, he went looks like 2.9. So that's kind of a bummer, but we have some backup plans, I think.
Right, and as fast as the quarterbacks do fly off the board in these drafts, quarterback is still relatively deep. And once you have at least one locked-in starter like we do with Justin Herbert, you can kind of patchwork your QB2 spot with 2, mediocre or slightly lesser than QB options, because thanks to the fact that quarterbacks touch the ball more than any other position, you can get spike weeks out of nowhere from even bad QBs. So even if our QB2 is not ideal and our QB3 is straight up bad, it could still be good enough to carry us as long as our other positions are sorted out in a spot that we like.
One thing I like to do in Superflex is count the quarterbacks going and by the end of a round, and then comparing that to the ADP to kind of see how if the quarterback or if the draft is quarterback heavy or if it's quarterback light, and you can sort of plan ahead, knowing like in the ADP there's supposed to be 8 quarterbacks gone by the end. Actually, 9 quarterbacks gone by the end of the second round. That's the case here. So
I pulled up the draft room just to show which quarterbacks are still available. And we've got Burrow, Stafford, Aaron Rodgers, Matt Ryan, Trevor Lawrence as the top ranked options according to the FFPC. Because I guess that means Tom Brady went. I missed him on the draft board, but I imagine he
just went 3-6. Yeah, he went 3-6.
So not many of these options are real thrilling. I mean, I'd be happy to have most of them. I'm pretty agnostic when it comes to quarterbacks, but we're on deck here. Seeing how the draft board has played out, what are your thoughts with this next pick? It looks like Antonio Gibson, Cam Akers, the most recent running back picks.
Yeah, so let me pulling up the running back. Well, there's some good running backs still out there.
Correct. Yeah, I'm looking at Aaron Jones, Najee Harris, Clyde Edwards-Helaire,
And I would say
Clyde
that
Edwards-Helaire, excuse me.
since my quarterback choice, Tannehill, has gone, probably shift gears, maybe go running back here potentially.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need to draft 3 running backs. There's also some good receivers on the board as well. So Burrow went, I think. I mean, Aaron Jones.
Yeah, Aaron Jones feels like a second rounder, and we're getting him at the end of the 3rd round. That seems like a huge value.
I think we could take 10 seconds here to just talk about our coming back, what we might want to do, or just think about it maybe in our heads quietly. But I mean, the guy after us already has a quarterback. So Aaron Rodgers does stand out. So we might end up with a Green Bay turn here if he doesn't take Rodgers. So I would go, let's go Jones.
Yep, I like it. I think Jones went to John Daigle at the 2-3 turn in the draft we did last week. So comparing apples to oranges, right? Every draft is different, but seeing him this much later is something that I'm very interested in. That feels like a nice bargain.
Yeah, and coming back, if this guy leaves Rodgers on the board for us, we could take him. If not, we have some other options maybe later in the draft. And there are also several good receivers out there. So
where do you stand on the Aaron Rodgers drama saga? Do you think he's going to stick around in Green Bay and play a full season?
I don't think they're going to trade him. And I don't think he's going to sit out. So I think ultimately whatever issues there are will get worked out. So Metcalf went at 312. I think that Rodgers will end up quarterbacking the Packers this year. And if he's not quarterbacking the Packers, maybe they trade him, but I don't think they trade him before the season. I think they might, if they're going to trade him, it'll probably be after the season when there's some more teams that are quarterback needy. Unless they just get bowled away with an offer from the Broncos or something. And in that case, he's still a good value. So Rodgers went.
Yep, Rodgers was selected. So the next QBs available are Matt Ryan and Trevor Lawrence. Do you have any interest in either of them at this point? Matt Ryan feels like a trap after Julio left.
No, that's a drop off for me right there. So I think Rodgers was a good pick there by Clear Eyes Full Chubs.
Great team name.
Probably shouldn't have talked about him that much. I probably should have said that he's going to be holding out or retiring.
I gave you the window and you didn't. I dangled the carrot. You didn't take it.
All right, 35 seconds. I think we should go receiver here. There's a couple of studs. Pulling.
I haven't talked to you much about wide receivers, so
we haven't. But I think we're having to shift gears here.
The top of the board here is plenty of good names. Who do you like?
Oh, why don't we stack Keenan Allen with Herbert?
Beautiful. I like it. So why don't you talk a little bit about trying to select Keenan Allen? Can I?
You did.
Okay. I think my draft room is having some technical difficulties, so I'm going to refresh that. But why don't you talk a little bit about your preferences in stacking? Is that something that you are actively seeking to do in every best ball draft? You kind of let it come to you? What's your approach there?
Well, looking at the draft board, I was looking at Justin Jefferson and Keenan Allen, and I went to look at my PPR rankings because I mainly rank with half PPR in mind. And so when I shift to PPR, I shift to standard, I have to sort of adjust things and double check my rankings to see where things are at. In this situation, I'm more excited about Justin Jefferson because he's a younger player and he's a shiny new object and everything. But I do have Keenan Allen higher in PPR. It's pretty close. But in this situation, since it's a stacking opportunity, I'll go ahead and stack. I don't usually go out of my way to. But if somebody's in the same tier and it's kind of close, it's a good tiebreaker to add the stack.
So while we're waiting for the draft to come back to us, this is a good time to mention that if you purchase a 4for4 sub, you will get a free FFPC voucher worth up to $35 to use on one of these drafts. So sign up at 4for4.com, get a voucher to do a best ball. It can be Superflex, it can be 1QB. It's up to you. They have a lot of different options at the FFPC, but it's a good way to get value right out of your sub right away. And with the sub, you get access to John's rankings, John's projections. Those rankings and projections feature a drop-down menu that lets you choose between different scoring formats. So he mentioned how he ranks for half-point PPR. You can actually toggle those rankings to show how they change with PPR, with standard scoring. There's even an option to choose FFPC scoring. The rub there is that, and we were discussing this a little bit before we went live, the quarterback scoring here in these Superflex formats is slightly different than 1QB FFPC leagues. In a 1QB FFPC league, you're given a point for every 20 yards passing, and interceptions are worth -1. Here in the Superflex format, the yardage doesn't get you quite as many points. It's 25 yards per point, and interceptions penalize you more. It's -2 for interceptions. Does that move the needle for you, John, when you're drafting? I know it'll move your projections, but in terms of which players you like, do very minor scoring settings adjustments like that change your mind on how you would rank or draft players very much?
Well, typically with the full projections that we do, I'll just input the new scoring system and sort of see how things change. And it will change. I mean, somebody with 16 interceptions compared to somebody like Rodgers, who I might have projected for 5 to 7 interceptions, it's going to change. It's going to change the rankings, or it could. I don't get too caught up in the drafting directly from my rankings. If I have a minute to make a decision and I sort of am feeling one player over another, I'll draft them, even if it's a interception situation where it's -2 versus -1, and it's just maybe he's a little bit more interception prone. If I feel like that player has upside or fits the team better, then I will go ahead and make that move. And I might even adjust my rankings based on what I do in drafts, because at this time of year, this is why I'm drafting, is to really refine my rankings so that they're pretty much exactly what I would do in any draft, and come end of July. So that's sort of where I'm at with that.
Right. When you're really put to a decision between two players, you might have one ranked ahead of the other, but for whatever reason, it doesn't sit quite right, and you'll make the other pick, and that's when you need to adjust the rankings, as Danny Carter would say. I'm liking looking at some of these other teams now that we are 4 rounds in pretty much. It's interesting to see how these squads are shaping up. Are there any approaches that stand out to you as appealing, or any picks that you don't like so far through the draft?
Well, it's interesting that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams already have 2 quarterbacks, and there's still 3 teams that don't have a quarterback. So you can see some different strategies there. Does anybody stand out? No. At this point, it's hard to make bad picks in the first 4 rounds. I guess it's possible, but it is interesting that Pitts is gone. Hawkinson's already gone. I think their ADPs were a little bit later. Yeah, they were going in the 5th round, according to the ADP I have. So to have them both off the board by middle of the 4th is interesting. And what it means for us is that there's probably not going to be a good tight end option here at the 5-6 turn.
Right.
So what I would start doing is thinking about, do I want a 3rd running back? Do I want 2 wide receivers here? Do I want to maybe draft our 2nd quarterback here? Draft 2 quarterbacks here? That's also a possibility.
So Nathaniel Miller entered the chat and asked about this drafter in the 6 hole who took 3 quarterbacks with his first 4 picks, and specifically a question about Justin Fields in the 4th round, as someone who technically isn't officially named the starter for his team yet. I do feel like that's a reach. I don't think Fields over Trevor Lawrence makes much sense. With that said, I mean, the upside's there with his talent. I think you can play ADP and say you didn't have to make that pick there. But what is your thoughts, or what are your thoughts on the Bears quarterback situation in general? Are you projecting Fields for the bulk of the starts there in Chicago?
He probably will be starting. I don't know the way that they're describing things. It doesn't seem like they want him out there week 1. That Andy Dalton is going to start the season as a starter. So how quickly do the Bears start losing games? That's going to really drive it. If they're 7-3 and Dalton is a starter still, he may continue to start if he's playing well. I think, I agree that in the 4th round as a 3rd quarterback, that's pretty that's pretty aggressive. Like, you must really believe in Fields if he's going to pull the trigger there.
Yeah, but I would argue if you believe that much in Fields, you don't have to take Josh Allen in the first or Tom Brady in the third. Like one of those earlier quarterback picks should have been a different position, right?
Yeah, and Fields' ADP is 5'4", so he would have had a pretty good chance of getting him in the 5th round, knowing if he misses on him, he's already got Josh Allen and Tom Brady. So,
right, and that is that is something about the Superflex format or the Superflex position that you can keep in mind, is that you're not always necessarily going to end up with 2 quarterbacks in your starting roster every week. There will be weeks where a running back or a wide receiver or a tight end will outscore 2 of your QBs. So I think drafting a third QB that early in general is a little loose, and specifically Fields that far ahead of ADP when you already have 2 other quarterbacks is not something I would do. With that said, I tend to wait on quarterbacks in general, so this person and I were not going to see eye to eye in the first place. So we're coming back up on the clock. Oh, go ahead, John. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that the other tight end I was pretty interested in here was Mark Andrews. He just went.
I didn't want to say anything because I was hoping he would keep sliding.
Dobbins and Montgomery went as well. Lamb. So
top of the board on FFPC's draft setup here are quarterbacks: Kirk Cousins, Carson Wentz, Trey Lance, Tua Tagovailoa, Baker Mayfield, and then it's a couple more running backs: Josh Jacobs, Travis Etienne. There's still some really good wide receivers available here. They're a little bit pushed down again because of the format, but Mike Evans, DJ Moore, Chris Godwin, like these are all really nice options. But do you feel the need to get your second QB here? What are your thoughts with these next 2 picks?
Maybe on this turn. I think at this point, since I missed out on Tannehill at 311.
There goes DJ Moore. So we are
DJ
up.
Moore. And I'm just looking at all the ADP is like a lot of quarterbacks here. Receivers, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. Okay. Tight ends.
We don't have a tight end yet either, and that is something we need to audit as we go here is how long do we wait in the tight end premium format. But which direction do you want to go here? Who's standing out to you?
I think get Mike Evans queued up here. I think I'm going to go with him.
Okay.
Since we have 2 running backs, and I think that a quarterback will be there on the way back. So go ahead and do Mike Evans.
I like it. Yeah. I think wide receiver, just based upon the overall talent level of the guys available, is where you're getting the most bang for your buck. You're getting a high-performing player with a locked-in role. This is where the running backs start to get a little dicey. I still like plenty of these names here, but we already have two that I like in particular with Henry and Jones. So, yeah, I think our next pick is probably a quarterback or a tight end. Do you agree with that?
I do, and I have a quarterback in mind, so we'll see if
clear eyes, full chub.
Yeah, if he's already sniped me on one. It wouldn't take much Sherlock Holmesing detective work to figure out who I like here on the way back.
He has 2 quarterbacks already, so right. I don't see him making that pick. If anything, I could see him going running back, wide receiver to kind of mirror our start, just in a different order, or tight end in one of those other positions. But with Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers already in tow, I don't think you need to take a third quarterback here from the 12 spot. But with that said, there are still 2 drafters who haven't drafted a QB at all. Including us, there looks like 5 or 6 teams that have drafted only 1 quarterback. So I guess it really depends on how much this 12th drafter wants to lock in a high end or a reliable third QB. It wouldn't be that important to me, but people approach these drafts in different ways for sure.
Oh, Tanyan. Okay, so
stacking.
Yeah. Yeah. So the guy I had in mind here is Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Your boy.
Yeah. So he and Cousins were pretty close. So I think go ahead and draft him.
Okay.
In my rankings, they were pretty close. So I felt comfortable that if we let them both go, with that guy in the 12 spot already having two quarterbacks, that at least one of those guys would make it back to me. And I feel like the quarterback position is getting a little bit thin here in terms of like dependability. So Fitzpatrick, I have him at 14 in quarterback. He may throw an extra couple interceptions or whatever, but I really like the upside of that Washington offense. And
now,
go ahead.
Now, if we had taken Justin Jefferson earlier instead of Keenan Allen, would you have been more inclined to stack with Cousins over Fitzpatrick in that spot?
I certainly would have thought about it if you had mentioned it. I might have forgotten that we had Jefferson on the roster.
Well, we don't have him. Remember, we took Keenan.
I know. I know. I'm saying if that was the situation, I would have. I wouldn't have been going, oh, I want Cousins because we have Jefferson. Because I'd be at this 5-6 turn. I was thinking of Fitzpatrick even as a third quarterback option. Because last week when we did you guys did the stream with Sal, I took Fitzpatrick, I think in the 6th round in the middle of it, and you guys were questioning my decision making in that situation because it was your third QB, right? Yeah, you were just saying it was sort of a luxury pick, and I ended up stacking Gibson, Fitzpatrick, and I might have had McLaurin on the roster as well, but I had Samuel later, and it all worked out. But maybe I was a little lucky in that situation. But I liked in these formats, I'd rather get yourself 2 to 3 good quarterbacks and not play chicken, because you can really end up with some ugly situations if you are not careful, especially drafting at the end of the round.
Yes,
because you get 20 something picks between your 2 picks. And, what I like to see is quarterbacks coming off the board after my quarterback pick, because they're really draining the depth now at a position that I don't really necessarily need a third guy. I mean, we can maybe grab somebody, but I think we can get by in Superflex. You can get by with Herbert, Fitzpatrick, and those are your 2 quarterbacks. And if they both stay healthy, then you just are going with one quarterback during their buys, and you're okay.
Yeah, in these drafts and in 2 quarterback and formats in general, I like to either start the run on QBs or finish the run on a particular tier of QBs. So earlier, when we discussed taking Aaron Rodgers, he got sniped from us. We didn't have the opportunity, but that would have felt like a good pick because we're closing out that last tier. You mentioned how he was there was a drop off after him.
Yeah, and I mean, you're talking Fields this is the first quarterback to go after Rodgers,
right? Which
seems a little odd. I mean, I think Rodgers is going there for a reason. Like, I think if he were having a normal offseason, he'd probably be a in the 2nd, 3rd round type guy.
So we had a commenter here ask about taking Fitzpatrick over Lance. And I'm sure this is in line with your projections, but can you talk a little bit about your expectations for the 49ers QB situation this year? Like, how many games do you expect Lance to start versus Garoppolo?
Well, that's not even just a Fitz over Lance. That's a double question mark and 3 exclamation points. So this is like questioning,
big deal.
Really questioning me, throwing me under the bus here. No, I mean, as I understand the 49ers situation, they are going to go into the season starting Jimmy Garoppolo. He's still on the roster. He hasn't been traded. They don't want to rush Lance out there. I do think he's going to get some starts, but it depends on how things are going with the team. And I don't want to draft that ahead of a starter that I'm kind of excited about. I mean, Ryan Fitzpatrick has Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, Antonio Gibson, Logan Thomas. This is the best. And they got a great offensive line. Now it's very deep. I was going through that with Justin Edwards, looking at the offensive line ratings for each of the teams, and they have one of the best O lines in the league. I love it. Like, I think he's going to be great. That's why I have him ranked 14. I think other rankers might have him 18 or lower. Maybe his ADP is QB 20 or something, but I don't care. Like, I was not thinking he was going to get back to us, and that's the guy I wanted of this group that's here.
Right. I'm going to bring up another comment here from a viewer asking about Waller, who went in the middle of the 1st round. So this question isn't totally applicable, but he's asking, in non-tight end premium, is this person crazy to think Waller shouldn't be falling to the end of the 2nd round? I don't see him falling there. I usually see him going in the late 1st or early 2nd round. What's your experience with Waller in tight end premium? Non-tight end premium.
Non-tight end premium.
I missed that.
So, yeah, he's going late 2nd, early 3rd? Or mid 3rd in regular PPR. I think that's right. And I think he's a good pick there. That's a guy I want at that 2-3 turn. Maybe pair him with a a stud running back and another running back potentially, or a receiver at that 2-3 turn. He's basically a receiver. So you're getting that at a tight end position where everybody else is, starting. Not everybody else, but most everybody else is starting somebody that's not seeing anywhere near his targets per game. Yep. And so you have that built-in advantage. I mean, for years and years and years, I would draft Antonio Gates in the middle to the end of the third round, because tight ends just would not go before that, even the top ones like Gates. But I remember taking him at 310 a million times, and he always returned value. And then I read articles about the onesie position and how you can stream it, and just like I love rolling Kelsey out there or Waller out there and watching my opponent try to figure out who they're going to start at their tight end position.
Yeah, it was always so great if you ended up with Antonio Gates or Tony Gonzalez back in his heyday, and they stayed healthy for the year. That was always the rub, right? As tight ends, because they're blocking on a lot of plays, because they're taking hits over the middle, they might be a little bit more prone to injury than other positions in general. And so a high usage player like Gates or like Gonzalez might come with a little bit of risk because of that. But man, when they're on the field, there isn't a much better feeling, especially if you are a good enough drafter to sort out your other positions later. Getting one of those top end tight ends really does feel like an advantage when they're active, right? So we're coming up here in a few picks. Who do you have your eye on at this point, John?
Well, interestingly, Deontay Johnson just went, and I had him ranked ahead of Mike Evans in PPR and passed on him because I thought he might make it back to us, but he didn't. All right, well, who went? All right, Goddard went. That was the tight end I was looking at here at the 7-8 turn. So, all right. So running back, we got Michael Carter's out there.
Mm-hmm.
I think he'd be my running back choice. 36 seconds. Kind of none of these receivers are. Go ahead.
Wide receiver is kind of a hodgepodge here. All these guys, I think, are very close in value. We could take our third QB here, but none of these names really stand out to me. Tight end might be the direction to go here. Tyler Higbee, Logan Thomas. We could stack Thomas. I like Higbee.
Go Higbee.
Higbee, I like it. Okay. So now we'll put it on this drafter at the wheel to make some decisions while we sort out what we're going to do next.
Yeah, quarterback got pretty ugly pretty quickly.
It did. We do still want to draft a third one at some point, but that third one could be, one of the supposed committee guys. If you feel like you have a good feel for, who's going to win a certain battle, whether it's, Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill in New Orleans, or one of the guys in New England, Cam Newton or Mac Jones. You talked about how you thought Garoppolo was going to start. Like, he's an option later. So we don't necessarily have to take a QB here, but what are you looking at, or where do you want to go with this next pick?
Well, I'm thinking running back is kind of falling off a cliff here. And I like Michael Carter to win that job for the Jets. I also like Raheem Mostert. The buys are both the same at 6.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go Carter. We'll just go with the shiny new toy.
I like it. What is it you like about Carter? I am notoriously not an avid dynasty player, so I don't know a whole lot about the incoming rookies. What have you heard about him that you like?
Well, the depth chart's wide open there. Tevin Coleman is the de facto starter, but there are already beat writers saying that it won't be long before Carter wins the job. He's actually more of they kind of touted him during the draft as like a scat back or pass catcher, but he's got enough bulk, and he's got a lot of carries in college as well. So I think he's a 3-down back, and I think he's going to end up being the guy there. And yeah, you can make a case for Javonte Williams, but he's got Melvin Gordon ahead of him. Gordon was fine last year, and I don't think that the path is as clear for him. And I do like Mostert a lot. So that's a tough one, but he's already injured. If he didn't have an injury right now, I might pull a trigger on Mostert there. But you can kind of see that if you look at the running back, it's just a list of running backs that are probably going to start, or we've gotten really thin on that. So I think it was a good time to grab one. And there was so many receivers out there that I didn't think it was necessary to necessarily take one at this point. And there should be some good guys next turn.
Yeah, this is the point in the draft where you are in handcuff territory. You're drafting running backs who are behind more established players, whether that's Tony Pollard or Kenyon Drake or Gus Edwards or A.J. Dillon. So we can sort out which one of those guys you like when we're closer to, wanting to draft from that group. But now that we have 3 presumed starters in Derrick Henry, Aaron Jones, and Michael Carter, I don't think that's necessarily going to be our next pick or even the following pick. Our next 2, I imagine, are going to be looking at other positions.
Yeah, that Higbee pick was a little bit of a panic pick, but I was thinking about him in the 8th. But for some reason, 7-11 was too pricey. I think it was because Goddard almost made it to us. Right. And sometimes when you get into a draft and you're like, "Oh, Goddard's falling." I didn't want to say anything on the Goddard's falling. Goddard's falling, and then you're like, your original plan going into the draft. One of the things we talked about is possibly Higbee at the 7-8 turn, preferably in the 8th round. But and then we're looking at it at that 7-11. We couldn't really make a distinction amongst the receivers or what to do with Michael Carter, and so that it's fine. It's 7-11 for Higbee and a tight end premium. I think that's fair value. And, maybe we should have gone Logan Thomas for stacking purposes. But I wonder
if we should have done what the drafter in the 9 position did, which is take Higbee and Logan Thomas. And just because we waited so long at tight end, maybe double tap the position there and make it more of a strength in this portion of the draft. Mm-hmm. Do you think that, like in hindsight, does that appeal to you more than the Michael Carter pick, is stacking those 2 tight ends?
There are just more tight ends that I like later. So I wanted to, with Carter, I think now I have 3 likely starters. Getting a likely starter at this point, Chase Edmonds went ahead of him. James Robinson. Raheem Mostert went right after him. He's a likely starter, but he's got Sermon breathing down his neck, and Javonte Williams will be a timeshare. So, I do think of somebody that might work himself into a 15-touch role. I think Carter's the most likely one. Not necessarily this group, because I think Mostert is the starter for the 49ers when healthy. It's just always I think in best ball, it's probably easier to draft Mostert because you don't have to decide when to start him. You could just enjoy his 8 great games each year. But I think in regular drafts, it makes it tougher because you just don't know what Kyle Shanahan's going to do for week to week.
Can we talk a little bit about Ben Roethlisberger? Because he was picked right after Michael Carter went to our team. And I see Roethlisberger buried pretty low in your rankings for this year. Mm-hmm. And the reports coming out of camp are that he's healthier, that the shoulder surgery before last season kind of took more of a toll than maybe we realized, which kind of makes sense seeing how he played out his 2020 season. Mm-hmm. Do you have any, is there any inkling that maybe we could be in for a bit of a Big Ben bounce back in 2021, or are you pretty confident that he belongs kind of that low in the rankings?
I just noticed that his yards per attempt has fallen off a cliff since, it was pretty good his entire career. And then the last 2 seasons, I think it was under 6 2 years ago. And then it was like 6.2 last year. And given his receiving core last year, that worries me. And I know he was injured and all that, but he probably should be a few spots higher. I was just looking at who I had him. Like, I have him behind Winston, and I wouldn't draft Winston over him right now.
Right.
Daniel Jones, I probably would draft Roethlisberger over Daniel Jones, but he also does not offer. Roethlisberger offers nothing as
no
a
rushing.
Yeah,
no rushing production.
So there's nothing there at that part of his game. So, but it's weird because you look at the Steelers, and we've got, quite a few of the receivers. Claypool, I don't know if he's off the board yet. It's just Smith-Schuster just went off the board. Deontay's off the board. So he's going to support 3 good fantasy receivers. But he's not probably not a QB1 anymore. So I don't know. It's just when the guy falls off, I have him for under 4,000 yards passing, and maybe that should go up a little bit when you think about, it's just hard when you look at his yards per attempt and it's just fallen off a cliff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is the range of quarterback where everyone's kind of the same. what's the difference, end of year between Ben Roethlisberger and Sam Darnold and Derek Carr and Daniel Jones? Like, these guys are going to give you some usable weeks, some not. In terms of best ball, you're going to get their best weeks. You're not going to be affected by their worst weeks, fingers crossed. So I don't think there's a whole lot of incentive to prioritize one or the other. This is where that calculus of how many quarterbacks have been drafted, how many quarterbacks does every other team need, and who can I expect to fall to me at what point? And ADP is a great tool. You've mentioned using that to kind of eyeball where you think these guys are going to go. But yeah, for me, like, while I am intrigued by Roethlisberger as a potential bounce back, just because we've seen him be good before, and if he puts it back together a little bit with those receivers, he could be a nice value considering where he's going. But I think you could say the same thing for Darnold moving to Carolina, getting away from Adam Gase. You could say the same thing for Zach Wilson, potentially, as a quarterback who's probably going to have to throw a good amount. For Derek Carr, who is, as much as I'm not a fan, he's generally perpetually underrated in fantasy. So I don't know. There's not a whole lot of incentive for me to push Roethlisberger ahead of all those guys. I just kind of view it as one, big globbed up tier when I look at that part of the rankings.
Yeah, now we're getting into look at who's left at quarterback: Goff, Newton, Taysom Hill. Mm-hmm. Looks like Winston just went. So you're really so how do you even prioritize the quarterback position right now, given who's available? Is the third quarterback that important, comparing it to some of those other players available?
I mean, this is where the chicken comes in, right? Like, I think that if you want to guarantee that, I think my approach is plant your flag on the guy you think is going to be the starter. If you think that that's Mac Jones or Cam Newton, one of those guys is an okay pick here. And because it's your QB3, it's not egregious to make that pick.
But do you have to have three quarterbacks come out of the draft with three quarterbacks?
I would like to, but again, like, do I want to prioritize getting a third quarterback at this pick? Not necessarily. I think that it is fair to look at the other positions. I think
because I'm looking at receiver, and there's a gentleman by the name of Odell Beckham sitting there, and I think I would like to draft him and add him.
How the mighty have fallen, man! Odell Beckham in what round is this? The 9th round? Get out of here!
Round. Almost the 10th.
What do you say?
Sounds good. Yeah, take him.
All right. Okay. And that is the other part of this is I'm definitely not picking a quarterback with that pick. Maybe on this next pick, because like we talked about earlier, there's so much space between our 10th pick and our 11th pick that if you do like one of these quarterbacks more than others, Goff at the very least seems like the locked-in starter in Detroit. So I think you could justify that pick as just a safe one. Mm-hmm. But I also don't mind waiting and just taking a gamble on one of these other guys, because you're right. You don't necessarily need a third quarterback as much as, I want to have one. I don't know. We just got sniped on Curtis Samuel, though. That hurts.
Yeah, I see that. And I'm going to curse the name, whatever his name is. I can't see on the draft board.
Clear Eyes, Full Chubb.
Clear Eyes, Full Chubb sniped me on Curtis Samuel.
Very
That's
class
okay.
18 name.
That's okay, though, because I have a backup plan, and that's Devonta Smith. So I think we grab him as our wide receiver 4. I
like it. The wide receivers are coming together.
Yeah, it's nice.
The squad is in general looking really nice. That Beckham pick and the Devonta Smith pick. I mean, Keenan Allen and Mike Evans aren't necessarily the true alphas like your A.J. Brown, Devontae Adams, Calvin Ridley. But, in some weeks they will be. And when you back them up with 2 high-volume guys like we expect Beckham and Smith to be, I think that puts us in a really good spot. It is interesting. Right after we made that Devonta Smith pick, Jared Goff went as the 4th QB to the drafter in the 10 hole.
Yeah, this guy wants to make us pay for waiting on quarterback. Hope he's listening. Congratulations. You got Jared Goff as your 4th quarterback.
I mean, who is really making pay is this person in the 2 hole who only has Matt Ryan so far. And that is a tight spot, to be honest.
Yeah. He's probably going to have to make a couple of painful picks.
Right. And we talked about this on last week's stream, but the real problem with going, full bore into late round QB or waiting on quarterback in these Superflex best balls is that even though it's best ball and that'll smooth out your week to week scoring, you don't get to go to the waiver wire to pick up, a backup quarterback who becomes a starter or an injury replacement at the quarterback position. So you do need to lock in some assumed stable QB production. I believe we've done that with Justin Herbert and Ryan Fitzpatrick. The question is, how important is it for us to get the third QB, potentially the fourth QB? Again, like I'd be fine kind of drafting any of these potential timeshare guys: Newton, Hill, Mac Jones, Bridgewater, Garoppolo, Tyrod Taylor, Drew Lock. I mean, you said that you don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to leave Green Bay, but I mean, if he just holds out, maybe Jordan Love has some value. But we are in the point of the draft where you're going to look at the QBs who you could take, and there's always going to be a better running back, wide receiver, or tight end option. Just always.
That's what I'm noticing, and it's something that I didn't have to deal with last week when I had Fitzpatrick in the 6th as my third quarterback. I was completely ignoring the quarterback position for the rest of the draft, and I was just loading up on these like high upside, running backs, receivers, tight ends, whatever.
So does that make you, in hindsight, wish that we had made another quarterback pick earlier? Like, should Michael Carter or Tyler Higbee have been one of Roethlisberger, Darnold, Wilson, Carr, Jones, or should Devonta Smith have been Jared Goff? Like, what do you think?
Well, I think we played it all right. I was thinking that Carr might make it back to us in the 9th, but then looking at his ADP, he is typically going where he went before where he went. Carr, I think, is underrated. He's finished top 16 back-to-back seasons, and he's going like QB 24 or something. So the offensive line is really is a little scary there. They made some really strange decisions on the offensive line, and I don't know that they're going to be as effective offensively because of that. But you're exactly right, because you're getting into where we're comparing Goff to Odell Beckham and Devonta Smith, and my fantasy brain just cannot compute taking my third quarterback Goff over, wide receiver 3 Beckham, wide receiver 4 for us, Devonta. I couldn't pull the trigger. So if we have to run with 2, I'm okay, and then maybe we'll see who's there. I could probably talk myself into a few of these guys, but even now it's like there are going to be players 11th, 12th, 13th round where I'm going to want the other skill position players as opposed to drafting a third quarterback that's not even starting, or it's probably going to lose the job.
And I think that's the argument for Carr or for Goff over Devonta Smith.
Yeah.
I mean, I get that Devonta Smith is, ranked or drafted in a spot where you want to get him, but because Goff was that last locked in, assumed 17 game starter, there's value in that, especially when there are other drafters who still only have 2, one drafter who still only has 1, to the point where I think maybe taking Goff there sets us up. Even if we miss on Smith, like wide receiver is deep enough. We only need to start 2 wide receivers in any given week. This is where you have to recalibrate for the Superflex format for sure. So there goes Cam Newton ahead of Mac Jones and that is the Matt Ryan drafter's 2nd quarterback pick. And I mean, man, if you're going to make that Cam Newton pick, I feel like you almost have to not take Jonnu Smith, but he didn't have a tight end either. So I guess I get it, but I don't know. This format is very difficult to parse, especially because you only have 18 rounds to do it. This is something else Sal and I talked about last week. It feels like these should be 20 round drafts instead of 18. I get that it's 18 to line up with the other slim formats they have, but because of the extra priority it puts on quarterback, you kind of need those extra picks to maybe flesh out a roster, but we're going to make it work one way or another. Just looking at the wide receivers going too. I mean, Will Fuller, Deebo Samuel, Jarvis Landry in the 11th, Mike Williams in the 11th. Like Landry and Williams are pretty well locked into, number 2 wide receivers on their respective teams. We're starting to see some of those handcuff running backs go. Gus Edwards just went. Ronald Jones in a timeshare theoretically. What are you thinking with our next pick? We've kind of discussed how we're never going to like drafting a QB, but is that something you're interested in at this point?
Look who's out there. We're not sure any of these guys are starters except for, I guess, Tyrod Taylor. And how long does he start? And is he a starter? Because Deshaun could come back.
Right.
So this is really dicey at like quarterback position to try to lock one of these guys up as the third.
I might wait.
Go ahead.
But Tyrod Taylor's job seems to be losing his job to younger QBs. And I don't know if that's Davis Mills. Yeah, it's
Right.
it's sad. Like, because I think he's a fun fantasy player, and I like having him when he's active. But yeah, it's sketchy to take him because there's really no guarantee he's going to hold that job all year, and he might not even hold it for more than a few weeks.
So no one's really jumping out at tight end right now. I do like. I'll
don't tell this next drafter who's on the clock. Beltalowda. That's an Expanse reference. I don't know if you ever watched the show The Expanse, but I
have
appreciate
not.
that.
I started watching it, and we're on the clock.
Yeah,
so,
we've talked about this. Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead. Who are you thinking about here?
Receivers are interesting. There's some. I'm thinking running back 4 here. AJ Dillon.
Okay. Handcuff with Aaron Jones.
Handcuff plus weekly value. I think he'll play quite a bit. The other option, I guess, would be Jamal Williams. But I like AJ Dillon with the handcuff plus weekly value.
Makes sense. I'm not a big fan of handcuffing necessarily in best ball, but these two specifically, it makes a little bit more sense to me because you're really capitalizing on basically every rushing touchdown the Packers are going to score when you have them both, right?
Right.
So you talked about weekly value with Dillon. Do you foresee him being that kind of Jerome Bettis goal line type? Do you expect him just to get, like a Kyle Shanahan-esque, like 10 to 12 carries a game or whatever?
I think he's going to frustrate Aaron Jones owners just like Jamal Williams did. So Mac Jones went and Hunter Henry went.
I like that little sneaky stack.
Yeah. So I'm actually thinking, these tight ends are going a little faster than I was expecting.
Mm-hmm. And we only have one with Higbee.
Yeah. And we could stack Jared Cook with them. It's a little early for him. But we probably should go ahead and lock up a second tight end. So yeah.
Now that you said his name, he's definitely not coming back to us.
Yeah, let's grab him.
Okay.
That's 2 rounds early on Cook, but the tight end position seems like it's going a little bit quicker than the ADP would indicate in this draft.
So talking about the idea of stacking a little bit more, right now we have a good Chargers stack going with Herbert, Keenan Allen, and Jared Cook. We haven't yet stacked with Fitzpatrick. I mean, I think that's fine, but how do I want to frame this question? Is it important to you to stack every quarterback you get? Like even in one QB best ball, is that something you're actively looking to do? Or do you try to focus on one team to stack and kind of let the rest of the pieces fall together? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, I'm not going to draft an inferior player just to stack. I mean, I think in this situation, Cook's ADP, I probably could have waited until next turn, but maybe not on a live stream if I'm talking about him. But I think talent-wise, Jared Cook is as good as any tight end on the board right now. He's still extremely athletic for the position. He's in a good offense. I already have the quarterback, so we're definitely playing up the Charger stack here. As far as trying to stack every single quarterback, no. Like if it happens, I'll do it. But like I said earlier, I'm not going to go out of my way. I mean, I was drafting Fitzpatrick with the idea that maybe we get Curtis Samuel later, and we just missed out on him. We probably could have done it, but I would have had to pass on Odell Beckham.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Beckham has upside as well. Probably should have gone Samuel there because then I think Beckham or Devonta Smith would have made it back to us. But
that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Samuel's ADP was such that I thought he'd be more likely to be there at 10:01 than Beckham. So the fact that Fitzpatrick doesn't have a stack doesn't bother me, especially since we're doing a pretty good job with the Charger stack.
Yep. I do think that tight end was the correct position to pick there because you look at all these other drafters that only have one, and there are a number of them to the point where, again, because you said his name,
like Jarwin went too.
Yeah, there is a possibility that Cook and all the other players ranked ahead of him were all going to be gone by the time it came back to us. It might not play out that way, but you do have to play it safe to some extent at some portions of the draft, especially with those positions that are a little thinner, like tight end, I think. I mean, quarterback is the easy example of that. So looking at the QBs, we're still seeing Taysom Hill, Bridgewater, Garoppolo, Taylor. Well, Hill just went. So now that Hill and Winston are both off the board, I want to take your temperature on that situation in New Orleans. Looking at your rankings, you have Winston projected as more or less a full-time starter, correct?
That seems to be the consensus amongst the Saints beat writers. I am extremely interested to see Jameis Winston post LASIK surgery as a starter. I was amazed by watching him squint at the scoreboard playing in the NFL as a starting quarterback, not being able to read the scoreboard without squinting. I found that amazing. And the fact that he now has LASIK, presumably has clear eyesight, I'm very interested to see how he does. I mean, it's a good offense. It's, playing for Sean Payton. Maybe the receivers could be better this year, but he's got Kamara, he's got Michael Thomas, and they've got Troutman at tight end, and they have some interesting receivers there as well. So I would lean his way, because what seems to be the consensus is that Taysom Hill was promised the backup job last year, and when Breeze went down, they gave it to him, and he played 4 games. He looked good against the Falcons twice, and they had one of the worst pass defenses in the league. When they played Denver, they were like, there's only one way we lose this game, and it's if you turn the ball over, so all we're going to do is run the ball.
Run the ball.
And then he didn't look very good he was okay against the Eagles, but wasn't as good as he looked against the Falcons. So that was his audition. And it just seems like they brought Winston back. I think he was a free agent, right? Winston.
Mm-hmm.
They brought him back, and they're going to open up the competition, but he's more of a normal quarterback than Taysom Hill. But I think the problem is that, with Winston, there's a chance that they pull him at the goal line, just like they did Breeze, and they've got Taysom Hill out there stealing touchdowns. So that's a little bit of a concern if you're looking to draft Winston.
Right. There are two sides to this conversation, right? It's which one do you think is going to be the general starter, the guy who's going to take the most snaps under center? And I agree. I would put my money on Winston if that's the case. But in terms of where these guys went in this draft, would you rather take Winston in the 9th or gamble on Hill in the 12th? I lean Hill a little bit, if only because he's still going to be used even if Winston is the starter, and you might get usable weeks from him in that super flex spot. So it's a bit of a conundrum. I've been fascinated to see how close they get drafted together in these best ball super flex formats. I think last week they went a lot closer together, but if the discrepancy is going to be, 3-4 rounds like it is today, I mean, I think I'd prefer Hill given cost.
Yeah, I don't know with Hill being a part-time, if Hill's a part-time player, I don't know how many usable weeks you get out of him. Maybe he throws a touchdown one game, rushes for another one, but I don't know if he's going to get enough yards to really give you a flex spot, but maybe.
All right, we're a few picks away here, and some of those timeshare quarterbacks have gone. So we're looking at Tyrod Taylor, Teddy Bridgewater, Drew Lock, Jordan Love as the top of the position on the FFPC's rankings. Again, it's the same problem every time. It's like I just don't want to take any of those guys when there are more viable players at other positions. Does anybody stand out to you here now that we're on the clock?
Not a quarterback. Gage went. At running back, I kind of like Darrell Henderson here as a high upside backup. There's not a lot of those high upside backups left. Mm-hmm. David Johnson is a starter, but God, that Houston offense.
Yeah, it's scary.
Not appealing.
Wide receiver,
maybe.
Still some interesting names.
Yeah, 38 seconds.
Tight ends looking a little dicey too. Like this is the point of the draft where you're kind of grasping at straws no matter what position you pick.
Yeah. I would say let's go Henderson, since he's the one that sort of jumped out to me amongst the running backs.
Yeah, we'll see what the person at the turn does here, and then we'll have another tough choice because, again, it's a lot of committee running backs, quarterback, as we discussed ad nauseum, are not looking good. Some of the tight ends are a little interesting. I guess maybe you want to bank on one more year from Rob Gronkowski. Seems a little dicey. Cole Kmet has some value, presumably as a locked-in starter, but I mean, my worry with him is that Jimmy Graham is going to pilfer all the touchdowns there.
He might pilfer the touchdowns. I was looking at Kmet. We're on the clock now. Receiver, there's still a lot of guys, but they all kind of look the same to me. And then I'm thinking maybe Teddy. What do you think about Teddy as the starter there in Denver?
He would be my pick because I don't think Drew Lock is good. Sal and I took Bridgewater in last week's draft for the same. We were kind of in the same position where we waited too long at quarterback and we settled for Bridgewater. Now, if these were all considered my teams, I might go the other way and take Lock here to kind of diversify and make sure that one of my teams had the predominant Denver starter. But again, like if you ask me to make a choice between those two, I think it's Bridgewater.
Okay, I'm going to go Bridgewater, and I'll explain my thinking also. This is also a little bit of a correlation play with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon because they're going to be better if Aaron Rodgers stays in Green Bay, which I think is going to happen, which means I think that it's either going to be Bridgewater or Lock. And it seems like already Bridgewater might be a nose ahead, although Vic Fangio is saying nobody's winning that job.
That's what June. He has to say, though, right?
That's what he has to say. But they brought Bridgewater in because Locke wasn't getting it done last year, and Bridgewater was competent for Carolina last year. So I think I like that Kmet pick, too. That was the other player I was thinking, and maybe as a third tight end, kind of a young guy that might break out. But we're getting down to just the nitty gritty at quarterback that now we don't have to worry about that for the next, 4 picks we have left in this draft. So David Johnson, 14th round.
I love that value, to be honest. Like
I do too.
He's a receiver too. Like it is PPR still. The guy is clearly the best pass catching running back on the Houston Texans.
I know.
And if they're going to be bad, that could be just a ton of targets for that dude.
That could be, and then maybe we should have taken him over Henderson. Although Henderson, I think, has that RB1 upside if something happens to Akers. I don't think you have anywhere near that with David Johnson, but you're probably getting a higher floor, as you mentioned. It's just tough. It's just so hard to take David Johnson. Like, how many touchdowns are the Texans going to score?
Well, I also feel like in terms of floor, we have that already at the running back position. Not only do we have Derrick Henry and Aaron Jones, we floored the hell out of Aaron Jones by taking A.J. Dillon. Yeah. Michael Carter, again, presumed starter for the Jets. Not a great offense, but if he gets the bulk of the work there, he's going to be fine. I'd much rather shoot for the upside with Henderson there. I think that's the right pick.
I'm also finding that it's very difficult for me to sort of wrap my head around PPR scoring with this draft, like the draft board in the room, because I don't have like my rankings loaded. So I don't know. I have to go and look and see who's available and who I might want at receiver. Because there's a bunch of names out here that I kind of like, but I'm not exactly sure where I have them all projected.
Right. And it's easy to fall into the trap of just looking at the way they have them ranked here and saying, okay, well, I'll take the guy who's ranked higher, who I think is close, right? Because I think I can get the player I like more later. Exactly. But the problem is that other drafters are doing the same calculus, right? And they might just go the other direction, take the player they have ranked higher. Like, I think at this point in the draft, there is more incentive just to get the player you think is better, even if you're going against ADP to some extent. Do you agree with that?
I think the ADP doesn't matter as much when you get to this point in the draft.
Right.
So you don't want to play games with it. If there's especially guys could move 2 rounds in an instant based on a good news report from the 16th to the 14th or from the 14th to the 12th really quickly, because nobody's going to look foolish drafting somebody that's going in the 14th round. You draft him in the 12th round. Like, who cares? So I'm more of I'd like to try to play the ADP game a little bit, like I did with Deontay Johnson. I have him and Evans pretty close. I have Deontay over him, but I thought maybe I actually have Lockett over Mike Evans as well in PPR. And I thought one of them might be there the round later. But they weren't. So we took Evans in the 5th, and then Lockett and Deontay went in the 7th. And I was thinking that maybe one of those guys would be there at that 7-8 turn for us.
Yeah. And I mean, if you're looking at ADP to make that call, I mean, it's fine. And if you miss, you have to pivot and go a different direction. That's, part of what's fun and challenging about these drafts is they don't always play out the way that you think they're going to. If it was 100% predictable, it wouldn't be any fun. As it's rapid, go ahead.
I was just going to say the other challenge here is on a live stream, how many of our opponents are watching, so that you and then we are also trying to draft kind of jointly, so you and I can't really discuss
right
until it's our pick. And then we have picking 11th, we have 2 picks really close together, so there's not a lot of time to sort of strategize what our next move is going to be.
Honestly, that kind of helps us in terms of if we want to discuss at least the second pick of the 2, we only have to worry about this person at the turn potentially watching it and sniping us. But again, you can't take any of that for granted.
Because I want to win this league. That's the bottom line. I don't really. Mm-hmm. This is good content, but let's win the league.
Darn straight, man. Kind of looking at who's available here. We know the quarterback's a mess. We're done with quarterback. Running back. Again, it's committee guys and backups at this point. I guess unless you want to talk about someone like James White as just a player who has a role, but this is not the type of player I necessarily want in best ball unless I have a very specific type of roster construction, and I don't think we're there. Like I think our running back floor is good, as discussed earlier, to the point where I don't need a guy who's just there for reception floor.
Would we take a 6th running back eventually?
I mean, maybe. I think last week, I have my notes here actually, we talked about 5 to 6 running backs being where you want to be. So I think we could take a 6th. Do we want to take a 6th running back before we take a 5th wide receiver? I don't think so.
Right.
Or a 3rd tight end? I don't think so. So we might be telegraphing what we're looking to do with these next 2 picks, but I think that's just where the value is in the draft too. Like you look at the wide receivers that are available. Tight end got picked pretty clean. I don't think there's a whole lot of value there. So, I mean, maybe we will take a running back with one of these next 2 picks because, like, I'm not super interested in any of these tight ends. We're not taking a QB. So unless we're going to double tap receiver, we're probably looking at running back receiver in some combination. What do you think?
Yes, I would agree. I would agree with that. I just saw that. Oh man, Marvin Jones just went, and then I was eyeing Rondale Moore, and he just got sniped. And then I was eyeing Rashad Bateman, and he just got sniped. So here's where we are.
I mean, still some intriguing names here at wide receiver. There are plenty of guys who could end up with strong target shares, or at least like big play potential as best ball guys. Running back's a little thin.
Yeah, I would say, I would say Traquan Smith. Maybe this is the year that he breaks out. He's kind of a higher ADP guy on the list there. Let's go with him.
Okay. Yeah, I like it. I think you kind of have to either be in on Traquan Smith or in on the tight end Adam Troutman. And Troutman went in the 11th, so if we're getting Traquan Smith in the 15th, that seems reasonable to me.
And we're maybe talking tight end on the way back, but I'm not seeing a whole lot of upside here.
You sure you don't want to draft Tim Tebow here?
Oh God. So this Tyrod Taylor just went. So now, so I'm thinking receiver here since we have 5.
Yep.
And actually, there are a couple guys I like, but let's go with John Brown. I think with the solid quarterbacking there. I mean, unless you want to talk me into T.Y. Hill. Oh, you already took him.
I clicked it. You said let's take him. I'm in. Let's keep this draft moving, John.
And I think with John Brown, he's joining a team that lost Nelson Aguilar. They have a number 1 receiver, and his name is Darren Waller. And then they got some rookies that did not do well last year at all. And Brown is coming off of a season where he was kind of nicked up, but when he was out there, he was pretty productive with Stephon Diggs. And the previous year, he had over 1,000 yards as the first year with the Bills. And I just think John Brown's a good player. So I think there's a non-zero chance that he's the number 2 fantasy receiver there after
Waller.
Darren Waller, yeah. And we'll see how decent that offensive line is. But some of these names are coming off the board right now. T.Y. Hilton in the 16th round. I mean,
it's nice.
That's
Manny Sanders 2 picks after.
Emmanuel Sanders. He was another guy I was looking at. There's some talk about who the number 2 receiver is in Buffalo, and I sort of lean towards Cole Beasley as the number 2 targeted guy there. And then will Sanders or Gabriel Davis be the number 3? That's the big question. But they went out and signed Sanders, knowing they were going to let John Brown walk, and they filled Sanders for, they took Sanders for a reason. I think Davis will play, but I don't know how much now with Sanders on the board. So a lot of these sort of like roll the dice, interesting type receivers are kind of coming off the board at this point that we were maybe want to add. We got 2 more picks. And now my brain immediately goes to roster construction. We do have one older tight end in Jared Cook. And there are a couple guys, I will say, in the tight end ranks that are interesting. I don't want to talk about them yet. But
sure.
A couple guys that could find themselves. Okay, Darrington Evans just went. He was somebody when I asked you about the running back situation, I was wondering what you thought of Darrington Evans, because I wouldn't mind having him with Henry, and I know people don't like to handcuff, but like I hate paying $35 for a draft, and then my guy goes down in the first week, and I don't have any way to capitalize from it. So
yeah, I think after we already handcuffed Dylan with Aaron Jones, I'd be less inclined to do it a second time. But that's kind of the way I approach it. Is I'm okay with like 1 handcuff situation like that, but 2 makes me a little. I don't know. It feels like you're giving up a little bit too much upside given the best ball format, right? Where,
yeah,
I'd almost rather kind of spread out the love, even if it is a player I like less at the running back position. And maybe we can talk about somebody else who got picked here. So like Darrell Williams or Phillip Lindsay. Again, Lindsay on the Houston offense, maybe not the best example, but Darrell Williams on the Chiefs versus Darrington Evans on the Titans, I feel like they're comparable in what you're hoping for if you draft them this late, right?
Right. You're hoping for some spike weeks or maybe an injury ahead of them. Giovanni Bernard and James White, the guy at the one spot, is going with the passing down backs. So he's thinking he'll occasionally get that 4 for 40 and a touchdown week. Right.
And because he didn't take many running backs in the early rounds, like he only had 2 through his first 12 picks, McCaffrey and Mike Davis. That's the floor play, right? I just want running back floor with James White and Gio Bernard. The dog loves the running back floor play.
Yeah, my wife's home, so my dog is going to bark for a little bit here. I'm going to mute for a second.
Okay. And I will once again bring up the fact that if you sign up for a 4 for 4 subscription, you will receive a voucher to join an FFPC draft worth up to $35. So you can do one of these Superflex Best Ball Slims. You can do a Superflex draft that has kickers and defenses. Those are 28 rounds. Those ones go super deep. Or you can use the voucher on a 1 QB Best Ball draft. It kind of depends on what you like, what you want to do. Either way, your 4 for 4 subscription is going to help you dominate that draft no matter what. You get John's projections. You get to see those projections translated into the scoring settings of your choice. And there are all sorts of other great tools on the website. Great articles from an awesome team at 4for4.com. So head over to 4for4.com, click that red subscribe button up in the top right corner of the page. And once you do, you will get that voucher to join one of these FFPC drafts and test out, what you're learning from all the content there at the site. Looking at some of the other teams here, like we're at the point now where we can kind of assess like who we think is our greatest competition, or just like which drafts we liked. And I want to first look at some of the teams that waited on QB and see if any of those stand out as ones that I'm more interested in. And I got to say, this drafter in the 3-hole put together a squad that I like. Trevor Lawrence, Trey Lance, Zach Wilson, 3 rookie quarterbacks is pretty bold, but with best ball scoring, you're probably going to get usable weeks most of the time out of all those guys. And by waiting that long, you really got to stack up some value here at the top with Kelsey in the first, Austin Eckler, Joe Mixon, 2 potential bell cows there for their respective teams. And wide receivers are really good. So let's bring John back in, and maybe after we make our next pick, we can talk about some of the other teams we like. Oh, I realized that I have to add John back to the stream. Still learning, everybody. We are up here. Sorry, John. Right. Tight ends are getting picked clean here. Who do you like in this spot?
As far as the tight end position, I think let's go with Herndon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now Herndon, I know you're also, and I don't think we're going to take another tight end so I can talk about him. I know you like Dalton Schultz a little bit too. Why Herndon over Schultz?
Well, I do think that Blake Jarwin is the better talent. So I guess I was going for some upside. Maybe this is the year that Herndon finally gets it together with a better quarterback.
Okay.
I'm looking at my PPR rankings. They're not too far apart, Schultz and Herndon. So I was also thinking about OJ Howard, but he went right before we picked. So should we take one more running back here, or should I go with 7 receivers? We're at 3 quarterbacks, 3 tight ends, 5 running backs, and 6 receivers.
Yeah, I think at this point it's kind of which player do you like the most as a potential value between running back and wide receiver. I don't think there's a whole lot of distinction between, in terms of roster construction, I don't think there's a big incentive to go one way or the other. We spent enough early at both running back and wide receiver that I feel pretty set with our presumed starters, quote unquote. And I guess, yeah, it really comes down to which player you like the most at one of those 2 positions. Does anybody stand out to you?
Well, I was looking at maybe a Packer receiver, Amari Rodgers or Valdez Scantling.
Okay.
You can make a case for some of these other guys, but
did we just miss on Scantling? No, he's still there. He's just
still
buried
there
in the rankings.
He's way down in the rankings. I think he's suffering from Aaron Rodgers' withdrawal. But let's go with Amari Rodgers. He's the exciting rookie.
Okay. That wraps it up. That's our draft at least. How do you feel about this team in general?
Really good. Our quarterback situation didn't go exactly as I'd planned. I was thinking, 3 quarterbacks in the first 6 or 7 rounds. But I think, getting Fitzpatrick where we did and getting Herbert where we did was good. And then running backs are great.
Mm-hmm.
I really like the group that we have. There's some really good early round picks. And then I think Carter's got upside. Henderson has upside. Dillon has upside, and he'll be an RB1 if something happens to Jones. Receiver looks really strong. I love the top 4 guys. I think after we waited a while after Devonta Smith to add our 5th, but the 3 guys that we added, Traquan Smith, John Brown, and Amari Rodgers, I think they all have some good upside. But we're pretty solid, I think, with the 4 guys that we picked in the first 10 rounds.
Yeah, I think the wide receiver depth helps us mitigate some of the risk we took on at quarterback by having Teddy Bridgewater as our QB3. Because like I talked about earlier, there will be certain weeks where some of these wide receivers spike, just big splash plays, right? A couple touchdowns or a couple long plays to the point where they're going to score like a quarterback would, and they can fill that super flex spot if Herbert or Fitzpatrick have a bad game while Bridgewater may or may not be the starter. I think that if anything, tight end is the weak point of this squad.
I think I would agree, but I think Higbee has a good chance to have a breakout season with Gerald Everett gone, upgraded quarterback as well. So I'm actually pretty optimistic about Higbee, and I think Cook is going to be better than his draft position as well. And plus, we got the stack going there. I have no idea about Herndon. I just took him, so I have him on a team. But tight end got I think Dawson Knox. Nope, he went as well before. Like I was
2 picks before us.
Yeah, and then maybe somebody should take Dan Arnold because he actually graduated from UW Platteville, just like I did. So I could have taken Dan Arnold as well. He's looking pretty good, I guess, for the Panthers. So I don't know how much he's going to play. But Schultz is not a bad one either, if you wanted to. But Tebow is going ahead of Dalton Schultz, so I don't know how I feel about that.
It's not right. I don't like it at all.
But, I think overall for the team and having to draft this in public without really having my rankings loaded the way I like it, I think we did really well.
Yeah, I like the team a lot. This feels better to me than last week's draft with Sal. No offense to Sal, but I think I like picking from the end of the draft order rather than the early draft order in these Superflex best balls. I feel like there's a little bit more value to be had in those early rounds, especially, the 1-2 turn, the 3-4 turn, where you can kind of stack picks together in a way that sets up your team well for the later rounds. I think it's harder to do when you don't have access to, unless you take Patrick Mahomes or, whoever your top quarterback is, first or second overall, it does limit you in terms of what you can do with that 2-3 turn, the 4-5 turn, and so on. So a slight preference for the end of the draft order for me here. And as a result, I like the way this team played out. I think it's a good squad. Are there any other teams here, just at a kind of glance, that appeal to you?
That's the toughest question right after a draft, because you have to try to take in every team as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe we could just frame it around the quarterback position. Are there any quarterback strategies here? Because that's the real difference between this and a normal best ball draft. Are there any QB situations that you think played out well for any given team? I mentioned the 3 rookies here for the drafter in the 3 hole. I don't know if I would have taken those 3 specific quarterbacks, but I like the idea of waiting on quarterback, still getting 3 presumed starters in theory, while getting that top tight end, 2 workhorse running backs. You know what I mean?
Yeah. What I can definitely do is pick apart every team that I see. That's easy to do, but picking one to talk about in a positive manner is not always great. But the guy who took in the 5 spot, who took Mahomes and then Tannehill, I see now that he stacked AJ Brown with Tannehill, so I like that. Mm-hmm. I do think he maybe reached on Tannehill. I think he could probably have gotten Tannehill in the 3rd, but then he wouldn't have his Brown stack. And then I like his Hawkinson pick. I like the Carson pick, but then I think he went a little. I'm just looking at his running back situation. I'm not sold on Chase Edmonds as your number 2, mm-hmm. and he took his 3rd quarterback before his number 2 running back. So that's he passed on Kareem Hunt, Myles Gaskin, Miles Davis.
Yeah, maybe the 2 pick is the one that stands out to me. If that was Myles Gaskin or Mike Davis, I like this draft a lot more. And then maybe you don't get Wentz, Lance, or Tua in this 7th spot, but at that point you could settle for Roethlisberger. Could have waited even longer for Darnold in the 8th. So I think, again, the people who end up taking their 3rd quarterback early, and again, there are many ways to win. There are many ways to construct a roster. You did this last week, and we kind of did lambaste you a little bit for it, taking the 3rd QB so early. But that is where I kind of it rubs me the wrong way a little bit. But that's, again, a personal preference for me more than anything else.
Well, he also might be really high on Tua and Chase Edmonds, and if he believes in those players, then go for it, because you got to get your guys. It's just that's not my personal preference with that group. Mm-hmm. Of running backs available and quarterbacks available. So, yeah.
Another one I like here is in the 9 spot, Kyler Murray in the 1st, and then waited a while before QB2 at Kirk Cousins. And
that's basically what we did too.
Yeah, exactly. So no wonder we like it, right?
Right. But then he got 3 good running backs, Justin Jefferson as his top receiver, and then maybe he double tapped the tight end position at 7-8.
Triple tapped it, really.
And then so his receivers are a little he could have taken Fant and then maybe T. Higgins and mm-hmm. then a Chenault, but he also passed on Odell Beckham and Devonta Smith for Chenault, which means he must really believe in Chenault. But he could have had a better receiving core than he had, but I think he's loading up on tight ends because he wanted 3 of the top 12 guys, and he did. He got 3 of the top 12 guys at tight end.
Right. Look at that. My nitpick here is if you're going to make these 3 tight end picks so close together, the Dawson Knox pick is not necessary. This should be another running back or another wide receiver. But yeah, very similar strategy to us. Even took the other half of the Broncos QB situation with Locke a little bit later than we got Bridgewater. So yeah, it's no surprise that I generally like what this drafter did.
He also took both Moss and Singletary.
Mm-hmm. Running back stack.
That's an interesting thing to do as well. I was going to ask you what you thought of taking, when you get into the situation where you take 2 quarterbacks early and you need a 3rd one, but you wait too long and these attractive guys are gone. Would you ever take a Bridgewater and Locke, or a Tyrod Taylor and Davis Mills, or mm-hmm. stack them that way?
after we made the John Brown pick, and saw the Drew Lock pick 2 picks later, I immediately thought, oh, maybe we should have taken Drew Lock there. But again, it's a little hedgy, and I like our starting quarterbacks enough, and I like the opportunity this squad has to fill the super flex occasionally with a wide receiver or running back, that I don't think it was necessary. Would it have been safer? Absolutely, yes. Lock in the Denver quarterback situation. Again, outside of an Aaron Rodgers trade or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, I think there is maybe something to be said about stacking 2 quarterbacks like that from the same team if you wait too long. I don't know if the Denver situation is one that I would want to do it with necessarily. Like the Niners situation would be more appealing to me. The problem there is that those guys are both more expensive than the Denver guys. So,
yeah, Trey Lance is going in the 6th round.
Mm-hmm.
So that's tough.
Yeah, whereas Tyrod Taylor and Davis Mills is a little bit more appealing to me. But I, in that case, I'd almost rather it be Deshaun Watson earlier plus Tyrod Taylor late.
And I think in this situation too, I might just pass on Tyrod Taylor with 2 good quarterbacks on the board on our roster. Pass on Tyrod Taylor and just draft Davis Mills, because you figure that he's going to start at some point, and maybe he starts by the buys for Fitzpatrick and Herbert. But I don't know. As you said before the stream started, that maybe Tyrod Taylor's job is losing his job as a starter.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I tend to lean that way with all the situations where there's kind of a placeholder veteran and a rookie.
Yeah, and Davis Mills is a little different because he was a 3rd round pick, but he was their first. He was their first pick in the draft this year because they did not have a 1st or 2nd round pick. But I think Tyrod is actually a good fantasy asset when he's starting. You just don't know how long he's going to start, because he's got the ability to run, and he's a competent thrower, and they are going to have to throw the ball this year.
Yeah, their defense is not going to be good. So that is the spot where I agree with you, though. Like, if I'm gambling on any of the Houston QBs, it's probably Davis Mills, again, based upon the fact that they took him with their 1st overall pick in the draft. Tyrod Taylor has a habit of losing his job to rookies who have been drafted by his teams. And, at some point they're going to need to see what they have in Davis Mills. And the best way to do that is in real game situations. I think he's going to be starting just more games than Tyrod Taylor when it's all said and done. And I think the same of these other rookies. Like, I would take Trey Lance well ahead of Garoppolo. I would take, I think I would at this point take Mac Jones ahead of Cam Newton. That one feels closer to me than the San Francisco situation, again, because Trey Lance was the 3rd overall pick. Mac Jones slid a little bit. I also think that Cam Newton is a little bit more appealing of a fantasy player than Garoppolo. So maybe I'm being shaded a little bit by that bias.
Right. I think Cam Newton in 11th round is a good value in Superflex, because they've said that he's going to be the starter until somebody looks better than him. Mm-hmm. The defense is going to be very good. They spent a lot on defense, and they're getting some guys back from the COVID opt-out list. And then what do we know about Cam Newton as far as he caught COVID and then had this long COVID where he said he was describing brain fog. Mm-hmm. So he wasn't going to play well under those circumstances. So I think 2nd year in the system, they added a bunch of receiving weapons. I mean, I could see Cam Newton holding on to that job for quite a while, especially if they're winning. So
we got a question here from Ferris Gansman and asking, doesn't really like going Dak plus Elliott, but he's wondering if we think that was the right combination of picks there. I mean, you can't really judge the Dak pick where you took him. You didn't really know who was going to be there necessarily in the 2nd round. But after you take Dak and you see the subsequent picks before, the 5th pick overall in the 2nd round being Zeke Elliott, do you think Zeke stacked with Dak is a problem? I don't see it as such.
Actually,
what about you?
You were asking about teams that I liked. I actually really like that, looking at that 8th pick, that team. Stacking Dak and Zeke, I don't think is wouldn't even count it a stack. But if you're going to take a quarterback and a running back from the same team, it's great to take it from a really good offense. Mm-hmm. And the Cowboys are going to score a lot of points, and the big questions about them are the defense. So you're basically locking up all their touchdowns, or almost all of them, unless you believe Tony Pollard's going to usurp Elliott. And I think I have Elliott higher than some of the guys that went ahead of him there, Kamara and Taylor. I think I've got Elliott higher in PPR. So I think that was actually a good value pick there, because you're sort of getting towards the end of that top tier of guys, or second tier guys, I guess. But then he took. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say this CEH pick in the 4th round looks really good to me too, and Stafford in the 3rd is fine. Like, yeah, this opening 4 picks is just a really good start for the format, I think. But
yeah, and I like the Stafford pick in the 3rd. I was thinking about him coming back to us in the 3rd. We had Aaron Jones there at 311, and we were talking prior to the stream that maybe, CEH there. Najee Harris was also there, so those are two. Running back slipped a little bit in the early rounds, and then he added Mark Andrews, who I was thinking about in the 5th round, and then he's got some good receivers there coming together: Chase, Galladay, Boyd, Antonio Brown, Cole Beasley, PPR guy, Sterling Shepard, PPR guys, yeah, and then my dog's saying it's time to be done.
I think the dog just figured out that the team we're going to lose to, and he's sad.
Yeah, the Raheem Mostert, I think, is the other guy, 8th round. I liked him as well, considering him with Michael Carter there. So, yeah, I like that group. I like that team a lot.
We got one more question before I let you go, John. I'm going to try to do the viewers here a solid here. Kirk is asking, what do you think about Akers, Swift, and Dommins back to back to back?
3 second-year running backs, high upside. You've got them with Waller, who we were considering at the 1-2
we wanted Waller here at the
Hurts is a high upside guy. I mean, I think that's a little bit of I think Hurts is he's going where he's going because he's got that huge rushing floor, and they've added Devonta Smith. He's got some weapons there, but he's got 2 good quarterbacks. The Deshaun Watson pick might just be a waste. A 9th round pick you're throwing out the window. I don't know if he's going to play this year. But I like all the other players: Deontay, Higgins, Jerry Jeudy. He likes a lot of second-year players. Looks like Denzel Mims there as well. Looking for those second-year breakouts. That's a pretty good team too.
Yeah, I like these tight ends late paired with Waller early too. I think that's a nice combo. And we've already talked about how we like the David Johnson pick. But I want to thank all the viewers for tuning in. Thanks for all the questions. Really appreciate you participating in the experience here with John and I. John, what are you working on, man? What's coming up next for you at 4for4.com?
Well, I keep updating projections. I just released who spent free agent money on defense, who spent free agent money on offensive line, which I don't think anybody is really looking at the way I look at it. Like, I compile all the salaries in and out during free agency to see like the net gain or loss for each team, and I think that's a really interesting way to kind of see who's investing in the defense and who's investing in their offensive lines. And these are, for the defensive side of things, it's great for fantasy just to pick a fantasy defense. Like I found that I'm going to go after the Patriots again pretty heavily this year, and then I think on the offensive line, it's something that's just kind of flies under the radar how much offensive line drives fantasy points for a team. Justin Edwards is doing some really good work in that area as well. I don't have a big article coming up soon, but then I'll have to write a bunch of positional articles and things in July and August. But just, you can look for me on Twitter, and I'm tweeting out stuff as I research players and getting my player blurbs together. So I'll be on Twitter quite a bit, posting some information that maybe people didn't know or didn't see yet.
Yep. Follow John at 4for4_John. And in addition to all that football stuff, you get a bunch of great takes on music and TV as well, movies, things like that. I know you've constantly got stuff in the queue, John, and it's always fun to see what you've been getting into. Once again, viewers, make sure you head over to 4for4.com, get subscribed. When you do that, you'll get a voucher to use at the FFPC. You can do one of these best ball drafts that are $35. Again, best ball, 1QB, all that stuff is available to you. You can follow 4for4 on Twitter, the website's account at 4for4football, no underscore there. And one last shout out for the 2QBs draft guide, which is going to be dedicated to these 2 quarterback formats. It's coming out later this year. Sal Stefanelli and I are working on that. Anything else before we sign off, John, or do we hit everything?
I think we hit everything. Thanks for having me. It was fun. It was definitely a challenge trying to draft in public against people that probably have my rankings and
Yep.
me not really having my rankings, because I was kind of doing it by the seat of my pants.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the plunge. We put you on the spot, and I think the team turned out really well. Make sure you guys tune in to this stream again tomorrow. We'll have James Coe doing an underdog best ball draft with Jen Akins from 4for4.com. So excited to be tuning into that, seeing how they do on the underdog platform. Otherwise, that's all I've got. You can follow me on Twitter at Greg Sauce. Appreciate you tuning in, and we will catch you next week when we do this again with another great guest. Thanks again, John, and thanks again to everybody for watching. Appreciate you.